Good day, folks. Welcome back to the discussion around Solaris 11 operating system. Hope you've got a chance to download the Solaris 11 binaries, both live media and text install, and had a chance to go through the installation procedure on either your laptop or a desktop on a VirtualBox virtualization solution. In this segment, we would take a look at the service management facility, also known as SMF in Solaris 11. In fact, SMF is not a new feature in Solaris 11. It made its way in Solaris 10 operating platform, replacing the run control script that used to exist in this OS for a very long time. Prior to Solaris 10 operating system, the services in Solaris used to be controlled by shell scripts. So when the system boots up, shell scripts are executed sequentially and the services were started accordingly. This system was replaced in Solaris 10 by a facility known as SMF, which is Service Management Facility, where these shell scripts were replaced by XML files, and the XML files were imported into a SMF repository. So the services could start concurrently. Not only that, it was basically ease of administration that was one of the objectives of SMF, because now there were commands that the administrators could use to find out the dependency of one service with another service, as well as a log file for individual service to fix any issues that generally pops up. So it's not a new feature, SMF in Solaris 11. It is only improved. A lot of functionalities have now been integrated into Service Management Facility. In this episode, we would take a look at the different commands that you could use to list services, manage services, and also understand the various underlying files and directories, as well as daemons around the service management facilities. So without wasting any more time, you will see my terminal of a Solaris 11 operating platform. For the sake of convenience, I am switching user to the root user, certainly not a recommended option on production. Just to be on the same page, we will find out what is the release of the operating system I am running. And you can see it's Solaris 11.3 on x86. You would remember live media installation is only available for x86 platform. One of the first commands we would run to understand service management facility is a command called SVCS, which obviously stands for services. And like any other command in Unix operating system, the -A switch generally gives you everything, all services in this case, regardless of whether that service is in a disabled state or is in an enabled state, whether the service is online or offline. So let's list all services that exist in Solaris 11, the machine that I am running on my system. As you can see, extreme left of the output, it actually gives you the status of that service, whether it's online or offline or in maintenance mode or in disabled mode. And you would also see on the extreme right side, you will see a lengthy string, which is what we refer to as FMRI, that stands for Fault Managed Resource Identifier. If you have seen my video recording on package administration part 1, you would remember me specifying this term FMRI, Fault Managed Resource Identifier, for the package name as well. The lengthy name that you get to see for a package in its repository is also of the same format. The only difference in that situation is it's PKG instead of SVC. I have highlighted SVC here, which is the scheme of FMRI. In this case, looking at the first string, first set of characters there, it's clear to me that this string represents a service in operating system. Whereas if you look at the same thing in a package, a name of a package in the repository, when you use a browser to search for a package, the name of the package is PKG. The scheme is actually PKG, letting us identify that the string actually represents a package FMRI. You would also see another pattern here, which is like /system/console-login:VT6. We will try and understand what this pattern actually means, or does it have any meaning at all to start with. So this is one of the first commands that you might want to keep in mind, SVCS -A. It will list all the services regardless of whether the service is online or offline or disabled or in maintenance mode. If you are interested in a specific service, and as long as you know not necessarily the FMRI but the unique string that represents the service name, you could always use the command SVCS system-log. So in this case, I'm not interested to get information related to all the services that exist. I'm only interested in a specific service called system-log. For the sake of completion, let me mention here that system-log is responsible for system logging in Solaris 11 operating system, which is handled by the syslog D daemon. Now you can see that I'm able to get information related to this specific service. So I could use the FMRI of a service with the SVCS command to narrow down the result to that specific command or specific service alone. Now we will try and understand what does that /system and /system-log actually means. I made a statement earlier that prior to Solaris 10 operating system, the services were started by using shell scripts. From Solaris 10 onwards, when service management facility was introduced, services were defined in XML files. The manifest of the services were defined in XML files. I am specifically talking about Solaris 11, so I'm going to confine my discussion to Solaris 11 alone. But you might want to bear in mind that the location of the files and directories that I show here may not be the same in Solaris 10 operating system. So it's important that you read through the documentation of that operating system to understand where specific files and directories are located. Now in this case, if I want to find out that XML file which defines the service for logging, which we call as a manifest, of course, it's very easy. We just need to navigate to the directory structure /lib/svc/manifest, and inside that you would see a list of subdirectories. Now the one that matches the FMRI here, which is actually the system, you could see a corresponding subdirectory for that under the manifest directory. This is a directory structure that will help us identify the exact location of the XML file that corresponds to a specific service. For example, if you're looking for a service that's related to networking in Solaris 11, obvious guess might be to go inside a directory by the name network under the /manifest directory. The FMRI of that specific service gives a clear indication of where you have to navigate to find out the appropriate XML file for that service. In our case, let's go inside the system subdirectory and you would see a list of XML files, and the one that matches the name of our service is actually system-log.xml file. But let me just clear the screen and run the SVCS system-log command one more time, which indicates to us that the system logging service is online. And we were paying attention to the fault managed resource identifier that represents the service there. Of course, what you see here as SVC is the scheme. What does this FMRI indicate? Is it a service or a package? In this case, it's a service. And then now we know that we have navigated to the system subdirectory under the lib SVC manifest system directory. The previous version of Solaris 10, there was a different directory location where these manifests were available. For academic purpose, let me just mention that here, if you land on a Solaris box, you would see a similar directory structure under var lib SVC manifest as well. But those directory namespaces do not have any XML files inside that. So now we can just open the, let's put a PWD here so you kind of get an idea of where we are headed. So we are in the subdirectory system as indicated by the FMRI there, and the service name is system-log.xml file. So it is this XML file that defines the system logging service. There are many tags inside this XML file. As you can see, the name of the service is indicated by this name value pair, which is the name itself. You would also see there is a tag that says dependency. whether this specific service is dependent on any other service is indicated by the tag here. Now you don't have to go and scrutinize this XML file to find out the dependency of a service on other services. There are switches that you could use with the SVCS command to get to know that. If you come a little bit down in this XML file, of course there are multiple dependencies mentioned in here, but what is very important for us is actually the section in the XML file that talks about exec_method. It is this section of the XML file that defines the start and stop method for this service. How do I start a service? How do I stop a specific service? So inside this section you would define either a script, or you would point it to a script and say, you need to execute that specific script to start that service. So your scripting knowledge is not going to go away. I mean, it's going to come in handy for you as well, just that you have to define a manifest, you have to define an XML file for that service, but inside that XML file under the exec_method you will define what is a script you would like to invoke to start that service. As you can see, the script that is executed to start the system logging service is lib method system-log, and you can see that the exec_method is defined both for starting and stopping the service. So all service needs to be started. There are situations where you may want to stop certain services. So again, how do I stop it? That is also defined by the exec_method. So the bottom line is this, that for every service in Solaris 11 operating system, there is a corresponding XML file which we call as manifest that exists under lib svc manifest directory. For the sake of ease of understanding and convenience, these XML files are organized under subdirectories. We have gone into a subdirectory called system, which is where we happen to see the system-log.xml file. Two of the important tags that we looked at in the system-log XML file, one is the dependency tag, which will let us understand what are the different services that this specific service is dependent on. And you can also see a tag that says exec_method, which is basically the section that defines how to start and how to stop a service. If you are of course interested, we could take a look at this specific script here, lib svc method system-log. So let's come out of this file and open lib svc method system-log. That's basically the script which is invoked. And as you can see, the configuration file old is defined by syslogd. If you go through this file, you would actually see finally there is a line that is used, a command that is used to start the syslogd daemon. Remember, system-log is actually about system logging, and you would also remember that the daemon in Solaris operating system responsible for logging services syslogd. So in effect, what you see inside this file is how to invoke the syslogd daemon. Having understood that there is a manifest and there is a method, there is a script that eventually starts the service, it is important to keep in mind that these XML files are not referred when you start your operating system. I mean, it's not really the XML file that the system reads to execute these services. In Solaris operating system, there is a directory called etc svc where you have a file called repository.db. Now this is the most important file when it comes to the service management facility. It's actually a database file, and it is inside this database you would have all the service definitions, or in other words, the XML file that we saw for system-log and the XML files that exist for the rest of the services in Solaris operating system are imported into this repository. So when the system starts up, it's not really the XML file that it reads to start the services. It's actually it reads the repository called repository.db, and there are many other files which by and large resembles this file name, and those files are backup copies of this repository. In case if repository gets corrupted, you could always revert back to the backup copies of this repository. These backups are automatically taken when the XML files are imported, or when some changes happen to the services in the database. These are automatically backed up when you have a clean reboot happening on the system. So you could see there are several backups with timestamp in there. In case if your repository gets corrupted, you can always restore it from the backup repository. How do you do that? Is by using a command. We will come back to that soon. But if you ask me a question whether we can navigate inside this repository, the answer is yes. I could use a command called SVCCFG. So two commands we learned so far. One is SVCS, which was basically to list the services that exist in Solaris operating system. Then we understood that every service has a corresponding manifest file in the form of an XML, which defines the dependency that the service has, which defines how to start that service. We also looked at the method that is used to start a service, and then eventually now we learn that there is a file called repository.db under the etc SVC directory that has all these service definitions inside it. So when the system starts up, it is this repository that is referred and not really the XML files to start and store the services. If I run the command svccfg, as you can see, my prompt changes. I'm literally inside my database. If I do a list command, you can see a very similar structure to the directory placement there. You could actually see these correspond to the various subdirectories that we observed under the libsvc manifest. So naturally there is a subdirectory called system-log. So if I want, I can actually say select system/system-log. I'm inside that. If I do a list prop, for example, I can see the properties that you saw inside that XML file. So these were the properties that we observed inside the XML file. As an example, start/exec, and it's actually pointing to the method that is used to start the system-log. So everything that we saw in the XML file is actually there in the repository there. There is actually no reason why you should be fiddling around with this repository. So let me come out of this repository, but you might want to keep in mind that you could interact with the repository by using the svccfg command. SVCCFG command, of course, can be used to import XML files into the repository manually if you would want to. Just keep that in mind. So two commands that we observed so far, one was SVCS command and the other one is the SVCCFG command. Now, before I move ahead with the demonstration of the other commands and various options that it has, I want you to know that there is a daemon by the name svc.startd daemon, which is actually the daemon responsible for the service management facility. It's called as a master restarter because it is this svc.startd daemon that starts and stops services that exist in Solaris operating system. In this context, let me also remind you that there is another daemon called svc.config.d daemon. svc.config.d is the one which interacts with the repository.db that we observed some time back. So please keep in mind these two daemons as well. One that is responsible for starting the services, which is svc.startd, that's also called as a master restarter in Solaris 11. And then there is another daemon called svc.config.d, which is responsible for interacting with the repository. There you would remember the command we used to interact with the repository was svccfg. From that itself, it is somewhat clear what svc.config.d daemon can actually do. It is the one that interacts with the repository there. Now let me clear the screen and show you a few more switches with the SVCS command. One of the switches we observed was SVCS-A. Then we looked at SVCS system-log. We spoke about the fact that we can always look at the services that this particular service is dependent on, and we can do that by using SVCS-d system-log. Now this is what we saw as defined in the XML file there, but there is no need to go to the XML file, scrutinize the XML file to find out the services that system-log is dependent on. Instead, I could run the command svcs-d system-log. So the list that you see there in the output are nothing but a list of services that system-log is dependent on. Now there could be a reverse situation. The reverse situation is such that some services may be dependent on system-log. You want to find that, it's actually SVCS-D system-log, and you would find those services that are dependent on system-log. Now this is one of the very first commands you would use to figure out if something is wrong with the specific service. So if any of your Solaris 11 service is not started, you would probably run the command SVCS -X system-log. At this stage, there is no problem with the system-log service. So obviously, there is no impact there. But in case if it says, it was not able to start, or it went into the maintenance mode, one of the commands you would probably use is to run SVCS -D system-log to make sure all the services on which this service is dependent on has started properly. I mean, one of the first switches you would use to debug a specific service in Solaris operating system. A very handy option with the SVCS command is SVCS -PV system-log, which will tell you the daemon that is started by this specific service. So literally you don't have to go read the XML file or the corresponding method that is invoked to start the specific service. By using the switches with these command, you could find out what is the daemon that is started by this particular service. So in this case, you can see SVCS -PV process that is started by the system-log service. Along with that would be the process ID, which is 683 there. So some handy options there. We looked at SVCS -A, we looked at SVCS -X, we looked at SVC -small d, we looked at SVC -D, we looked at SVCS -PV. These were some of the switches that we looked at when it comes to the SVCS command. Now let's take a look at the system-log option one more time. The service is in online state. If you don't want it to be an online state, you can always disable that. By the way, do not run these commands casually on a production machine, because those services that you're playing around with might be very crucial for your production to run. So these commands are just for learning purposes. Please make sure that you know the implication of these running these commands on your production environment. Always practice it on your development machine or your test machine before you apply it on the production box. So if I want to disable the service, I can do that by running the command SVCADM disable system-log, and then if you want to verify that, you can verify that by using the SVCS command. You could see that the service is disabled. We can enable it again back by using SVCADM command itself. So 3 commands we learned in this section. One is the SVCS command, which is used to list the services, find out dependency of a service, find out which services those services are dependent on, find out the daemon that is started by a specific service. We also looked at SVCCFG command, which is used to interact with the database, which is repository.db. Now finally we will have a look at, we just had a look at the SVCADM command that is used to modify the status of a service, which is disabling a service or bringing the service back online, etc. So this is a third command that you might want to keep a note of. Finally, the command that is used to restore your repository in the event the repository is corrupted is lib svc bin restore _ repository. That's the command you would use to restore your repository in the event your repository is corrupted. We already had a look at many backup files that existed there. So if I hit enter there, it will list me the backup files that exist. I can specify the name of these files as an input, or I could actually specify -seed -. It's trying to pick up the default one. I don't want to proceed with this because the proceed would call for a system reboot. But if you specify -seed as an option here, it's going to import the XML files all over again into the repository.db file. So I'm not going to proceed with this. I would say no there. So these are some of the basic commands that you would use in the service management facility of Solaris 11. Now I just want to stop this episode by giving you one last piece of information, which is in the event your system is down and your services repository is corrupted, you will not be able to boot your system, not even in single user mode, because single user mode also expects some of the bare minimum services to be up and running. So how do you run this command to restore your repository to a backup repository? I mean, you would need a terminal shell, of course, to run this command. So if your system is down and your repository is corrupted, you're not able to boot to your single user mode, there is a new milestone. I mean, from Solaris 11 onwards, there are no run levels. There are various milestones that the system comes to. If I run the SVCS command, you can see various milestones that exist here. One is a milestone called multi-user-server. The other one is a milestone called multi-user. Then there is a milestone called single-user. The concept is very simple. In single-user milestone, only a certain subset of services have started. In multi-user, a good number of services are started. In multi-user-service, most of the services are started. But even if my system is down, I will not be able to bring up the system to the milestone single-user, because single-user also requires certain subset of services to be started, and my repository is corrupted. So there is a special milestone called none, N-O-N-E. You will have to boot your system to milestone none, and you do that by specifying boot -m milestone is equal to none in a Spark machine, or you will have to edit the grub of your x86 box, and at the kernel you would have to specify -m milestone is equal to none, boot the system to milestone none, and then you need to specify the command restore_repository, the one that we observed a couple of minutes back. Run that command and you should be able to restore it back to a backup repository there. So here is a summary of service management facility, a quick discussion on the service management facility we've had in this episode. One, of course, from Solaris 10 onwards, we don't rely on the run control scripts to start a service. We have service management facility replacing that. Services can be listed by using a command called SVCS. We had a good look at a number of switches that can be used with the SVCS command. The service definitions are in an XML file which we refer to as a manifest. It's libsvc manifest. That's a directory where you have all the manifest files located. The manifest file has many sections that defines what is the file that needs to be invoked, or a script that needs to be invoked to execute the script to start the service. What is the start method or the stop method, the dependency that service has, etc. We also understood the very important concept that it is not the XML file that is referred by the system when the system starts. These XML files are imported into a repository called repository.db under etc svc directory. We saw several backup files of the repository there. In case if the repository is corrupted, we can always run the command libsvc bin restore_repository. And we know that if the system is not up and I'm not able to bring it up because of corrupt repository, there is a special milestone in Solaris 11 called none, to which you can boot and then run this command to restore the repository. We looked at a command called svccfg, which can be used to interact with the repository there, and there was another command that we learned which was svcadm, that is used to operate on the service, whether to disable the service or enable the service. Of course, there are more to the service management facility, but I think we have discussed fairly decent amount on this topic, which can help you get going with the Solaris 11 operating platform. I want to thank you again for taking time to watch this episode, and I really hope it was useful for you.